You're listening to The Alex Jones Show. Crashing through the lies and disinformation. It's Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network.
Welcome to the Alex Jones Show on this February the 8th, 2015. I'm David Knight. I'll be your host today. Paul Joseph Watson will be joining me in the second hour. We have a lot of news to go over. You know, there's been a lot of talk about Brian Williams and the news about how he lied about his personal experiences, how he essentially made himself kind of a anchorman superhero. But, you know, there's some real substantive things that he lied to us about. We're going to talk about that, but it's part of a much larger issue of credibility from our government, from the media. We're being told that we need to just shut up and take the vaccine. We don't need to ask questions about the kind of global regimes they want to enact in the name of climate change. We should just shut up. All those climate deniers, all those vaccine deniers, yeah, that's what they're calling people now who question the numbers that are coming out from the CDC, that are questioning the numbers that are coming out from the pharmaceutical companies. We're going to look at the history of some of these measles outbreaks. We're going to look at the swine flu epidemic from 1976. We've got some amazing clips from 60 Minutes, back when there was some real journalism, back when the pharmaceutical companies didn't own the media companies lock, stock, and barrel. You can't turn on the television set and see anything other than one pharmaceutical commercial after the other. They basically own these media companies. It doesn't matter if it's Fox News or MSNBC or CNN. They are owned by the pharmaceutical companies. And people can't get past this cognitive dissonance of seeing puppy dogs romping in the sunshine and the high grass as they go through a very rapid litany of all the serious side effects that these medicines that they're trying to sell you are going to create. And if people can't get past that cognitive dissonance, if they can't get past the understanding that these vaccines have some real safety issues, there's some real issues with what goes into the vaccines, there's some real issues with the fact that they're giving people multiple vaccines instead of spacing these things out when they give them to people, all of those things are significant. Nevertheless, the slate is just wiped clean. And if anybody complains about this, they say, well, you just don't understand how vaccines work. I understand perfectly well the theory of vaccines, and I understand that we're not getting clean vaccines. And as we pointed out last week, it's like saying that you're getting potatoes when you buy fast food fries. There's a lot of stuff that's added to those fast food fries that makes it more than just potatoes. And that's also the case of the vaccines. We're also going to be talking about how Alan Greenspan is predicting that there's going to be an exit from the euro that's inevitable. This is all something that I think is paving the way, just as we see with all these trade agreements, it's paving the way again for world government, because what he says is this is not going to be fixed unless we go to a politically integrated Eurozone. See, that's the end game. They want to go to a full political integration. If they don't do that, they're not going to get their world government. And that is what this secret trade treaties that are being negotiated and secretly by corporate lobbyists, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the Transatlantic Partnership. We're not allowed to see what those are. Our elected representatives are not allowed to see what those are. They're going to bring in these quote-unquote free trade agreements. Ron Paul said a long time ago, you don't need thousands of pages to have free trade. It is a managed trade agreement, and it's far more than that. NAFTA was far more than that. These are all steps toward global governance, just as this myth of man-made climate change. And I say a myth. We have an article that we're going to talk about with Paul Joseph Watson that's up on the Drudge Report. It's the headline on Drudge Report, essentially, fiddling with temperature data is the biggest science scandal ever. That's from the London Telegraph. We're going to talk about that. And, of course, that's something that goes back years as well. That goes back to, I think it was 2009 when they first did the ClimateGate dump. They got thousands of emails, and a couple of years later they did ClimateGate 2, where they got 5,000 emails. It just turned up on a Russian server after years of getting stonewalled on FOIA requests, wanting to see the data from these scientists who are trying to reorganize everything in our society and bring other things to the table, but yet They wouldn't allow the data out, so somebody leaked it. We saw the same kind of fudging going on back then. Stay with us. We're going to be right back You won't want to miss this report about vaccines.
When cells become toxic, they die early and aging sets in. No one has put together a formula that focuses directly on brain health, nerve growth factors, and optimizing your cellular energy at the same time. Just one of the key compounds, BioPQQ, is backed by major clinical studies. You want the best that's out there at the lowest price anywhere? We now have the synergistic solution. Secure your DNA Force today at InfoWarsLife.com or call toll-free 888-253-3139.
The average person's life is filled with unexpected challenges. Unlock the energy it takes to defeat these daily beasts with Super Male or Super Female Vitality, specifically designed to assist the body in regulating proper hormone balance to create superior vitality in males and females. Supercharge and conquer your world at InfoWarsLife.com or call 1-888-253-3139.
Listening to an Infowars.com frontline report. It's Alex Jones.
Welcome to the Alex Jones Show on this Sunday, February 8th, 2015. I'm David Knight. I'll be your host today. Paul Joseph Watson will be joining us from the UK in the second hour. Of course, there's a big story that's up on the Drudge Report right now. The fiddling with temperature data is the biggest science scandal ever. The data is there. They've been trying to cover up this data for a very long time. We've had ClimateGate 1, we had ClimateGate number 2. We had a situation where in one of these they leaked 1,000 emails and the other one they leaked 5,000 emails. They saw scientists who were pushing this man-made global warming agenda, talking about how they can hide the decline. Talking about how the data didn't match their models, even in the short term. And they're talking about models that are predicting climate change over decades, over centuries. It's very hard to verify that. And yet, we have seen already that their models are failing even in the short term. Even after a couple of decades, their models are not holding up. So we're going to talk to Paul Joseph Watson about that. There's also news out of Utah. There's a massive Utah cyber attack, up to 300 million cyber attacks per day. They think it may have something to do with the fact that they've got the NSA facility there. That's where they're storing all the information that the NSA is collecting on everybody worldwide in violation of U.S. law, in violation of the Constitution. But, of course, they could care less. It's important that we talk about the Constitution, even though we understand that for the people in Washington, it is a dead piece of paper. It is not self-executing. But we have to get people to understand that they're using the Constitution to presumably give themselves authority while ignoring the very law that they swear to uphold. In this particular case in Utah, they say just 5 years ago, they had only about 25,000 to 30,000 attempted cyber attacks every day. Now it is 300 million attacks against the state government's databases every day. That's 10,000 times greater. And they say, well, you know, what could it be? Well, maybe it's hackers who think they can get to the Utah data center through the state computer system is what they said. No, I think it's really more probably a retaliation for being quislings of the NSA when they violate the law and nothing happens to them and they brag about the fact that they violate the law. You know, it could be coming from the NSA itself. You know, they're behind most of the hacks, most of the collection of data in this country, as well as the rest of the world. Maybe it's coming from the NSA, but I think it's probably a retaliation. As we look at the stories that have come out this last week, I think there's a trend in terms of credibility. Over and over again, we see the credibility of the news media as well as the government being exposed as absolute lies. We've seen this with Brian Williams, where he embellished his own personal resume. He's talked about how he looked down the barrel of an RPG when his helicopter was shot down. Didn't happen. He talked about how he looked down the barrel of a gun as he was being robbed, selling Christmas trees for a church. That's been called into question. Saving kittens from burning buildings, all this kind of stuff. But, you know, the lies that really matter are the lies that he told, the lies that he supported from the government when we went to the Iraq War. There's an excellent article up on antiwar.com where they talk about the the many sins of Brian Williams. They say, although he just misremembered, he says, it sounds very much like George Bush, what happened in that helicopter incident. They say that it really, for him, it goes back to 9/11. As a citizen, he had thought on that fateful day, he said, thank God that Dick Cheney and Don Rumsfeld and Colin Powell were on this team. How together we all seemed. You know, that's the kind of mentality. And even, they point out in this, even when he had an interview in 2006 with President Bush, when he could have asked him the questions as to exactly why did we go to Iraq? You didn't even say they were the ones behind the 9/11 attack. You said they had weapons of mass destruction. Those weren't there. Instead, he said nothing. And when it was being covered on a daily basis, as they wrote back every day, some people on the inside told the author here, every day Brian Williams was asking the question, did Baghdad correspondent Richard Engel have any news other than another 20 Iraqi civilians killed when an IED detonated, leaving the same smoking carcasses and pathetic scenes of loved ones crying? In other words, he's not interested in what happens there unless it serves the military-industrial complex's agenda of going to war. That's what we should be concerned about, not just his personal credibility. He knew that he could get away with these lies to embellish his own personal reputation because he's been lying to the American people as part of the regular news on a daily basis. And we see this happening across the spectrum. We saw this happening and being used with the Sony interview hack. We see how they're trying to use that to bring forward an absolute control of the internet, saying that this was something that came from North Korea. We've got to be protected, so everybody needs to share all their data with the NSA. We need to grant immunity to the corporations who are turning over all your information to the NSA. And we need to establish the government in firm control of the internet, just like they are in authoritarian regimes. And when we look at the way they use this comedy, the interview, to push for the assassination of a leader that they're opposed to, and consciously doing this, coordinating with someone who is in the RAND Corporation, coordinating with the State Department, saying, we want to change the regime in North Korea, and the only way that we can do this is through assassination. So let's get that meme out there. Let's throw that into that comedy. It really kind of sheds light on what the BBC is about to do this week. They've got a three-part comedy that they're going to air, a sitcom called Asylum. And this is really about Julian Assange, of course, the idiot that they've got. And, of course, this is about character assassination because, of course, character assassination always precedes real assassination. And they've been after Julian Assange because of the lies, the government lies that he exposed. They've been after him for quite a long time. And, of course, as you probably know, he's been holed up for years in the embassy of Ecuador in London. They gave him asylum, but he's essentially been under house arrest there. The British have spent more than $10 million, maybe it's 10 million pounds, surrounding that embassy to make sure that he doesn't get out. So now they're going to come after him with a comedy. And the interesting thing about this comedy is the person who wrote it, whose name is Phipps, had tweeted before, if the Met Police want to regain my trust, they should drag Julian Assange out of the embassy and shoot him in the back of the head in the middle of Trafalgar Square. There you go. That sounds just like Fox News when they said the same thing about Julian Assange. Just take him out and shoot him. Well, actually, they said the same thing about Alex Jones. You know, when Barrett Brown retweeted what Fox News had said in terms of an assassination tweet against Julian Assange, when he retweeted that, the FBI added that to the charges against Barrett Brown and said, you're threatening an FBI agent. And he wasn't doing that at all. He was quoting the tweet, what was said on Fox News. And so now you see that Fox News doesn't get charges brought against them for saying Julian Assange ought to just be shot. And, of course, it doesn't happen with the BBC either. Instead, the guy gets a job writing this comedy. And here's the premise of the comedy here. In the comedy, which will air on February the 9th, tomorrow, Ben Miller plays an Assange-type character that's described as a serious, self-important egotist who's accused of leaking important documents. He's forced to share his quarters in the London embassy of a fictional Latin American country, El Rico, with a guy named Ludo _. Oh, who is that? Well, they even point out that that's a reference to Kim.com. So they take all the government's enemies, people who would expose and have exposed the government's criminal actions. Let's just put all these people in a sitcom, and we can create these sitcom straw men make them look ridiculous, and tell everybody, hey,